Hey everyone, welcome back to Supreme by Sarah Pearl. I am your host, Sarah Pearl, and as usual, I'm so excited to get into the topic for today. But before I get into it, I want to welcome all of my new listeners. Thank you for tuning in to Supreme by Sarah Pearl. I hope that this podcast episode serves as a valuable resource to you along your personal development journey. But without further ado, I have a wonderful friend and guest for this episode. This is Lania, and she is one of my really good friends. And I have her on here because I feel like she has been on her own personal development journey for quite a while. And whoever I bring on to Supreme by Sarah Pearl podcast, I want to make sure that they are on their own personal development journeys. And I think she is definitely on her own. So this is the hope dealer herself, Lania Cole. Welcome.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be
We're
here.
happy to have you. I'm excited about this conversation.
Same.
But before we get into like questions and the meat of our discussion, I guess I want to know, like, tell us a little bit who you are. Introduce yourself a little bit.
Yeah, so Sarah knows me by Linnea, but most everyone else knows me by Nia Love. That is the alias that I use for my influencing platform. I am an influencer. I talk about relationships, mental health, trauma, and self love, but I'm also a serial entrepreneur.
Yes.
And that means that I do a little bit of everything. I mean, diversifying my portfolio, of course.
Yes.
So I'm in the credit game, the rental car game, getting into the real estate game. I'm really just learning. I'm being a sponge right now in my life.
That's
So
amazing. That's amazing.
what
How
I
long have
do.
you been on your serial entrepreneurial journey?
Man, since we've met, Sarah.
That I know.
Yeah, I've honestly been on this for over 3 years now, just trying to figure out what's the best lane for me.
Yes.
As you know, I've been exploring a lot of different lanes of entrepreneurship, trying to figure out just what is going to have the best return, but also what fits my personality the most.
Yes.
And I think I'm still trying to figure that out, to be honest. But since I'm a full time entrepreneur now, it's like, okay, right now we're just diving into whatever gets us the most money at the moment.
And you know what? I feel like now that you have time to explore
Right.
those, like you, so when you're at a job, and I currently work 9 to 5, Lord help me. Okay.
You're almost out of there.
Yes.
We're going to get you out of there.
We're almost there. But now that you're a full time entrepreneur, you have a lot of time on your hands to explore the different dimensions of who Nia Love is, right?
Right.
And uncovering what it is that you really want to do and how you want to make that impact. If you are dedicating 40 hours a week or plus to someone else's dream, then you literally have no time to explore it, because I know for me, I have to be extremely intentional with my time, and giving myself space to explore who Sarah Pearl is herself, and doing that with a 40-hour work week. A lot of the times when you get off work, you just
Burnt
you
out.
you barely have time to cook a decent meal for yourself,
Yeah.
let alone think about all the things that you experienced in a day's time and uncover it and process it, and I don't know, like compartmentalize it as you need to in your brain. And so with you being 100% in this entrepreneurial route, that is, I admire that 100%.
Thank you.
What's some of the challenges you've experienced up to this point?
Every day is a challenge.
Yes.
Honestly, as a new entrepreneur, when you're just now building the foundation for whatever you're doing, you're going to
Yeah.
have a learning curve.
Absolutely.
Like you're going to take L's, which people think of that as losses, but we've been learning that it's nothing but lessons.
Absolutely.
Things that you can't even predict are going to happen, are going to happen. And you're going to lose money, but we call it investing our money because honestly, we've invested in the lesson. So we've
That's good.
invested a lot of money into these lessons. So of course there's a curve, and coming off of working a 9 to 5 where you're used to getting a paycheck, every week, every 2 weeks, every month, it's like now we got to figure it out or we don't eat.
Yeah.
You
It's
know.
like, it's literally do or die.
Right.
You will not have the basic necessities of life if you don't figure it out. And I feel like a lot of the times that's why people are so afraid to step out and do their own thing. I am convinced that most people in the world have a dream, an underlying dream, and they're too afraid to pursue that dream because their safety net will be taken from them, right? And then they will be put into a do or die situation. But when you're at work, it is very comfortable, so to speak. Like if you show up to work, you get PTO. Like, so there's days you don't have to show up and you still get paid. There's days where you show up and you really don't do anything and you still get paid, right?
Right.
So in the entrepreneurial world, there's no safety net there. Like you have to show up every single day, or you will not produce the results that you want to produce. That comes with a lot of self improvement along the journey. Do you
Yeah.
have any advice for people? Because I know there's somebody listening to this right now that maybe we do want to take that step, but they're not there mentally to take the step. Do you have any advice, anything that you went through to get to that point?
Honestly, taking the jump, even though it's scary, one thing that I've done is that anytime I'm faced with a big life changing decision or I'm at a crossroad, I always ask myself, am I choosing faith or fear with my decision?
That's good.
And staying in my job would be a fear based decision. Staying there just because I'm comfortable with expecting a paycheck. That shows that I value my security over my own happiness.
Wow.
And one thing that the panoramic taught me was that there is no such thing as job security in the first place.
It's all an
Like I was
illusion.
unemployed for 6 months, and then going into teaching, which was my last job, I recognized not even that was stable as I watched people who'd been there for years get laid off this year because of the incoming recession, depression that we're about to experience.
Yeah.
So once I recognized that there is no stability even with a job,
Yeah.
I was like, well, why not go do something that makes me happy? And when I say that we're in a do or die situation, I don't necessarily mean that negatively.
Right.
Like being in this do or die situation has really exposed me to my strengths. Like you don't know what you're capable of until you have to use it. Like I didn't know all
Yeah.
of the skills that I could honestly capitalize on until I was put in a place where I have to think about how I can use what I'm good at to bring in income.
That's good. Yeah, and a lot of the times people don't realize a couple things. They don't realize that one, that they have strengths beyond what they currently are aware of,
Right.
and they don't know their strengths outside of a 9 to 5, right? And I've realized it's funny that you mentioned that because I think about my college days, and I've been thinking about my college days, how many times I jumped from major to major,
Oh man.
and it really took me a while to get into what it was that I thought that I really wanted to do. And I settled on exercise science, human performance, anatomy, physiology. That's something that I genuinely just have a passion for. But before I got into that, I went into like telecommunication and film and all that. And I was thinking back on it, I was like, man, did it really just take me that long to figure out what it was that I wanted to do? And something told me, my higher self, God, it was like none of that's going to waste. Like you actually had an interest in all of that, and you have strengths in all of that. But college and the way the world works, the way that the job works, is that you can only pick one thing that you're good at, and that's what you have to run with for the rest of your life. And that alone terrifies me. I have a fear of peaking out before I die, before I leave this earth.
Yeah.
I never want to plateau while I'm here. I want to continually elevate. But the way that you elevate in corporate America is to take on someone else's dream and find a way to elevate within that dream. There's really no place for you at that, like in the company itself.
Yeah.
You can align your skill sets and things like that with the company, but at the end of the day, it will never highlight all the dimensions of who you are. And this whole idea of making decisions based off faith and not fear, that is huge, because fear is a controlling tactic that's used by all things in power.
Yep. Yep.
And I don't know how far we want to go into that
We
today.
could really go deep into that.
Right. But fear is definitely a control factor. And if I think about how fear's operated in my life, it's always kept me stunted. It's always prevented me from wanting to do certain things that ultimately elevated me and moved me forward. And so this whole idea of making decisions purely off of faith, I want people to grasp that concept, because if you do anything out of fear, that's not of God. God is not fear.
Right.
He has not instilled us with fear. Fear is usually embedded in us from situations outside of us. It's external, right? And so that's something that I've had to do, is learn how to make decisions, not of the fear emotion in me, like the fear
Yeah.
of failure, the fear of not having resources and things I need to move forward in life, whatever. It takes a lot to be able to do that, right? To
Yeah.
make a decision like that. So how was that for you? Like, was there a time when you were making decisions out of fear and you had to make that transition?
My entire life.
Yeah.
My entire life. I mean, my degree is in mechanical engineering. And the whole reason why I even went into engineering in the first place was based off of fear. Because
Wow.
everyone was like, well, you need to make sure that you're going to get a high paying job when you graduate, because you have to make sure that the family's taken care of and that you're stable or whatever. So I dedicated 8 years, because I started my engineering track in high school. So
Wow.
I dedicated 8 years to learning engineering just to get out in the field for a year and recognize, like you said, there's no room for me. You specialize in one trade and then you do it for the next 40 years. The beautiful thing about entrepreneurship is that I can change what I want to do. I can bring in whatever I'm good at, whatever I'm feeling at any time. I can just do whatever. So when I really switched my mindset over to thinking about faith instead of fear, it was actually right before I lost my job due to the panoramic. And I was at a construction job for a year, and I had my yearly report. And let me tell you, I was miserable at that job.
I remember talking to you about it.
I was miserable. Like, I would wake up every morning like, oh my goodness, I can't believe I'm going here again. Like, I would dread waking up in the morning just because I would have to go to work. And when my boss called me in for my year review, he was like, you look miserable. You look absolutely miserable. And I was just honest. And I was like, yeah, I am.
Wow.
I am. And he was asking me what could they do. And he basically set me up to where I could move into a different department within the company. And as I looked at the department and talked to the department head, she was basically like, you're going to be doing essentially the same thing, but just from a different angle.
Yeah.
And they were going to pay me the same. And of course, we were in the middle of basically a job crisis where people were getting laid off. So I knew that finding a job was going to be difficult. So I had to choose between staying at basically the same job with the same pay, or potentially being unemployed or finding another job. And I remember I was sitting in like the break room by myself crying, like, God, please give me something. And I just heard faith over fear in my head.
Wow.
And from that moment, I was like, okay, I know that I have to make the faith-based decision here. And then, of course, I was unemployed for 6 months, and that was one of the hardest 6 months of my life. However, now that I've been there, it's like I can do anything as
Yeah.
long as I choose faith. Because, I mean, I ended up in a job that I love.
Right.
You know, even though it was a job, at the end of the day, I ended up in a
But you
job that I
enjoyed it for
love.
the most part,
Yeah.
which is nice. Yeah.
Teaching was fun.
Yeah.
Teaching was fun, but at the end of the day, I recognized I just couldn't be an employee. That's just not who I am.
Right. Okay.
So honestly, me making that faith-based decision put me in a space where I could go into a job that I love and that I could reconnect with people and just enjoy for that time being while I got my footing leading into full-time entrepreneurship.
Now I know that you have a story about like how you got to this point. Do you mind filling us in? Because I want everyone that's listening to know that this has been a journey for you. Like, this
Yeah.
hasn't always been where you were mentally. And so I would love for you to shed some light on like what you've been through and how you ended up here.
Oh my gosh. Okay.
She's overwhelmed just thinking
Let's
about it.
let's figure out how to put that in like a small, short period of time. So, starting off as a child, I was raised in a single parent household. My mother and my father, they split when I was about 6 years old.
Okay.
And I was born into a toxic situation. Like I started off behind the curve because my parents, they were 19 and 20 when they had me. So they were fairly young. My father, he was in the drug game. And my mother, she had to basically settle in a job that she did not want to do because she was pregnant. And even looking back further from that, my grandparents on my mother's side, like my grandmother, she's fully Korean. She was grew up in the Korean War.
Wow.
So she had a bunch of trauma. My grandfather was in the army and he served in the war, and that's how they met. So he had a bunch of trauma
Yeah.
that passed down to my mom. My dad had his own trauma of never knowing his father and his mother just doing her best.
Yeah.
So my parents were already in a toxic situation. So I was born into toxicity. So growing up, seeing things that I probably should not have seen at 3, 4 years old, being hip to the bad parts of the world way too young. And then also being in a situation where my mother and father did not know how to love themselves, much less love each other, much less love a child. And having an absent father, even though he tried to be there, he emotionally didn't believe that he could live up to the role of a father. So he was very absent. And same with my mother. She felt like she had to play the father role. So I always say I felt like I never had a mother. I had a dad,
Right.
in my mom.
Right.
So she went through her own things of dating men who were no good for her, who were very toxic, abusive, alcoholics, drug addicts, and bringing them into my space. And I don't blame my parents at all. We've gone through a long road of forgiveness, and we've already had these conversations, and I'm able to have a strong relationship with both of my parents now, which is great.
That's amazing.
But it took a long time to get here. So growing up, dealing with, my mother's people, being abusive and bringing that into the household, and then dealing with my father and his ex-wives and his situation that he had going on. I grew up very depressed and anxious as a result. And of course, in the traditional Black household, mental health isn't a thing. You don't want to go to the therapist because then they're going to label you as crazy, and then you're never going to get a job. And
Don't put your business out there in the streets.
right. People are going to take advantage of you if you show any type of weakness. That's what I grew up on. So I grew up in a very depressed and anxious state and not even knowing what depression and anxiety was.
You just felt it.
Right. And I mean, back then technology wasn't as prevalent as it is today. So it's not like I really knew what to Google. I didn't really.
Ask Jeeves didn't necessarily have that on.
Right. And social media wasn't popping. So it's not like it was popping up on my timeline all
Right.
the time. So I went my entire life knowing that something was wrong with me, but thinking that this was something that I was going to have to deal with for the rest of my life. So I literally went through life like, well, I guess I'm just always going to overthink. I guess I'm just always going to hate myself. I guess I'm just always going to be this sad, depressed human being. So going through that, it put a strain on my self-love and my self-confidence and just my overall quality of life. And it wasn't until I got to college that really started to turn around for me.
Okay.
My freshman year of college, I lost all of my friends, and I started going to counseling because I was just so sad and depressed. And she ended up putting me on Lexapro. And I tried Prozac and Zoloft along the line, but if you know me, I'm not a firm believer in medicines in general. And it started because of that. Because when she put me on Lexapro, I became more suicidal. So I actually had my first suicide attempt after being on that by overdosing in freshman year of college. So after that happened and after I got into the hospital, it felt like my life started over. Because that was the moment as I was laying on the hospital bed, I was like, man, I don't want to die.
Right.
Like, that's not the problem. I don't want to die. It's just that I'm sick of living the life that I'm living. And so from that moment on, I went on this journey of figuring out, how can I conquer depression and anxiety? I had gone my entire life just coping with it, just accepting the fact that I was going to have it for the rest of my life. So I flipped a switch in my brain and I said, okay, I know that I do not have to live with this for the rest of my life.
Amen.
I am rebuking that.
Amen.
I'm going to figure it out. I don't know how. I don't know what to do next. All I know is that this got to go.
Yeah.
I'm ready to be happy again. And that was what, 7 years ago. And from then I went on this journey of just figuring it out.
Yeah.
And I don't know what happened. I feel like it was just an encounter with my spirituality, with my higher self. I don't know what flipped in me, but something in me just said, you have control. You can control what thoughts you choose to entertain.
Wow.
You can control what negativity you allow into your life. You can control essentially how you feel about yourself by reprogramming yourself. And I feel like maybe that was from reading books and being around you guys and just all of the people that we met in the business that we were in.
Sure.
And just all of the encounters that I was having, that maybe that sparked that over time. But it just, that understanding of my power now, like,
The power of you.
I have more control
Yeah.
than I think that I do.
Man, and that, I don't mean to cut you
No,
off.
go.
But the whole idea, like with, okay, depression and anxiety, that's a very real thing. Like, people are, people are debilitated for that very reason, like because of depression and anxiety and all these other like mental health issues that go on in people based off like their past and whatnot. And my, like, I've had experience with, not necessarily being depressed, but having loved ones who suffer from depression and loved ones who are suicidal and things like that. And so I kind of have a perspective on it from like someone like watching it happen, you know what I mean? And I know that is very real. A lot of all the situations that I'm aware of with my loved ones that have experience with that, they all seem to have this idea that they don't have control over anything.
Yep.
It's almost as if they are they're victims of this world and there's nothing that they can do. And in a sense it's true because that's where their mindset is at the time. Right. It takes I would say, like you said, like a spiritual encounter, a self-awakening, so to speak, for you to understand the true power that you have. Because if you think about the enemy, you can call him the devil, you can call him a negative force, like whatever you want to call it, whatever, like the devil's main intention is to deprive you of self-awareness. And I know with Supreme by Sarah Pearl, that's what I want to help people get to that point, is understanding that you have a choice. And you have power in like your decisions you make. You have power in the course that your life takes. Like, you have control over it, but it's just a matter of like shifting your mindset. And unfortunately, a lot of the times you don't get to that point without experiencing something that gets you to that point. And while I'm proactive with talking to people and helping them understand the power that they have, sometimes life is the best teacher. Unfortunately,
Sadly,
I hate to say that, but life has been my teacher. Because there's been a lot of things that happen in my life where, like, I've been in, unhealthy relationships. There's been like traumatizing things that's happened to me, and I had to. In those moments, I had important decisions to make. I can either lay here and be like just stunned and paralyzed with fear and self-loathing and all these things, not knowing who Sarah Pearl really is, I could stay here,
Yeah.
or I can pursue the things that I know God has called me to pursue.
Right.
I can be the person I know God has called me to be. And doing that, I'm not saying that it's just as easy as that,
Right.
because there's like, if you choose to go like the divine you route and finding out who that is, it requires intentional action steps from you.
Yeah.
It's not just going to like, aha, yes, now I can go and be a full-time entrepreneur, and I can, I can, whatever, I can do all these things that, I feel like God has called me to do. It requires intentionality, right? And I guess I'll shift gears a little bit, because one of the biggest things that I had to struggle with was finding out what my femininity meant, and finding that, right? Because I grew up I have two older sisters and a younger brother. Both my parents are still together. We grew up in the same household, all that. So we were a whole family, right?
Yeah.
That's the American dream. That's what it's supposed to look like. But there was so much dysfunction in our house. So much dysfunction. I grew up in an environment where it was always everything's happy go lucky, and don't talk about anything that's not.
Yeah.
Right.
Oh, wow.
Right. So I had to learn how to communicate in my adulthood things that weren't positive, because naturally I have rose colored glasses on. I love everything. And my husband, he kind of brought me to earth, honestly. But I grew up naturally strong, stronger than most dudes in my class. Okay. And I mean, I'm just being honest. I'm just being
what it is.
It is what it is. It's my story.
Yeah.
And so like physically, I like, I don't know, like I struggle with this idea that I look like a dude. And dudes weren't attracted to me because I could literally bench press more than them. And I also grew up in a house where my mom was she was the one that was like the breadwinner. Like, she held it down. Okay.
Yeah.
Not saying that my dad didn't, but my mom, she had the steady job, and she brought in six figures and all that good stuff. And I have my grandmother, my aunts, they were all single household women holding things down. And so I grew up understanding, like, I don't need no man.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, I can hold my down, and I'm physically strong as well, so I can defend myself.
Yeah.
And a lot of the times I had to defend myself. A lot of the times, like this, I had a situation where I had a teammate who, sexually assaulted me at a meet. All right. And thankfully it didn't go all the way there.
Yeah.
But because, like, literally we were in the same weight class. Like, we will work out together, me and this guy. And I was just as strong as he was. And so I was able to fight him off.
Yeah.
Right. But growing up, I learned that I could protect myself, but the danger in that is that I didn't feel valued enough for someone else to protect me. Right?
Yeah.
Because I didn't have a man in my life protecting me, fighting for me, and, telling me how valuable I am and things like that. I just didn't have that. And so I remember in school, that phase where guys, they touch your butt, and God, I hate. Can we end that? Can we make that not a normal thing, please?
Yeah.
Okay. But anyway, I remember like fighting guys off, punching them, and doing things like that.
Yeah.
Where I realized now that's where my dad should have, stepped in, but I didn't have that. That wasn't him. He was working through his own, much like you. Like, I understand the things that my parents had to overcome in order to raise children and things like that. But I lost my femininity in my childhood.
Yep.
And I didn't have women in my life either who knew how to be, like, operate in their true feminine nature.
Yeah.
And when I got married, 5 years ago, I still didn't understand femininity 100%. I was still working through it, and I'm still working through it today, to be honest.
Yeah.
But I know with your your personal development, you've had to touch into that yourself, right? Do you have any thoughts on that at all?
Yes. So, like you, but also not like you. I grew up in a household where the women were very masculine, and I don't mean manly.
Right.
I mean masculine, as in they were the breadwinners. They did everything. They did the protecting because the men weren't around to do that.
Right.
And essentially, when you have a household where it's just one parent, that parent has to take on the father role because the father role is what keeps you afloat, essentially. So I'm surrounded by women who are super masculine. And I've always been the odd one out because I am a very feminine person. And I've always been super feminine ever since I was a little girl. So I would always get yelled at by my mother, my grandmother, my aunties, my cousins, like, oh, you're so soft. You're so weak or whatever. Because they viewed femininity as weakness.
Wow.
And that was something that I had to overcome because I grew up in my head thinking, well, this is who I am. I guess I'm just weak. And I'm not the type where I could be more masculine. That's just not in me. That's just not who I am. So I just grew up, and that was part of me not liking myself, is I just grew up feeling like I was just a weak-minded individual.
Yeah.
So I allowed men to treat me like I was a weak-minded individual.
Wow.
But it wasn't really until I got into the relationship that I'm in today that I recognized that femininity is not weakness in the presence of a true masculine man.
You better say that.
Because I had to recognize that femininity is really power. It is true power. I just talked about this.
Yes.
I'm talking with my mother a lot because she's now in this space where she feels like she doesn't have to protect me anymore because my man got me. So she's able to really tap into her femininity and get back out into the dating world. Okay. So I've been talking to her a lot about tearing down that masculine part of her so that she can allow a masculine man into her life, because a man he's not going to want to date essentially another man and a woman.
He needs to be needed, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Men like to have their ego stroked a little bit.
Yeah.
They like to feel like they're playing their part. So if you have a woman, that strong, independent black woman that don't need no man, and she acts that way, it's hard to let a man in. So I'm teaching my mother how you don't have to put up a wall in order to protect yourself. You do not have to shut people out emotionally. You do not have to see vulnerability as weakness in order to protect yourself. Your womanly intuition is going to protect you.
Yes.
You have the power. As women, we can feel, we can sense, we are very energetically in tune.
Yep.
So if we feel a situation where we are not safe, all we have to do is have the confidence and the self-love and the self-worth to snatch ourselves out of it.
That's it. Listen, that speaks to me because I was that person that viewed femininity as weakness.
Yeah.
I was the one that was like, girl, you gonna be out here stranded with some man that don't love you, and you ain't gonna have you're not gonna have any way out of it because you're not making your own money and you're not doing all this and whatever. That was me. And I didn't think I was going to get married. I was so hard on this independent black woman kick that I didn't want a man opening a door for me. Okay. And that's where I come from.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Everyone, that's where I come from. Okay. And so I feel like now in my current place, understanding the power of my feminine essence, how it serves my husband, and also how my husband serves me back. Like when he opens a door for me, you know what that tells me?
Yeah.
Girl, baby, I value you. I appreciate you. I appreciate what you do. When he expresses dissatisfaction with how a man treated me in public, all right, and he stands up for me, what that tells me is that, baby, you don't deserve that. You are a goddess, you are a queen, and you don't deserve that.
Right.
And having someone advocate for you in that sense, and I'm speaking from experience, going from a place to where I had to do that myself. I'm a queen, I'm a goddess, I'm all like, yeah, that's powerful, affirming yourself, like being able to do that, but never having anyone recognize that in you.
It's exhausting.
It's so exhausting. And when I found Desmond, he was the first man that ever stood up for me, that ever showed an ounce of concern and love and like protection that the little girl in me needed,
Yeah.
honestly. And growing, well, in my college years, protection to me and my girls meant controlling, right? So, oh girl, no, he trying to control you,
Yeah.
like no, like he genuinely loves and values you, and he wants to show you how you should be treated out here. Man, how you see how the enemy works, like something that is pure and natural and affirming, he turned it into something the complete opposite.
Yeah.
And I I learned, like, along my personal development journey and finding out the power of my femininity, I began to shed off all of this self-loathing that I had, because I had this situation where I was very spiritual, Christian believer, grew up Baptist, all this.
Yeah.
And God would, in the Bible, say you are a helpmeet, you are submissive, and throw out all these words. I'm like, God, that's not,
Yes.
you and I are on different pages here. That's not who I am. So why did you create me like this if you're telling me that that's what that is?
Yeah.
And so I had, like, man, that was one of my rock bottoms, actually, was with God. And baby, when you hit rock bottom with God, that's a different story.
Everything changes.
Exactly. And so I had this discord with God. I was just like, I'm not who you say I am. I'm not this little meek, submissive type person. I don't want to be a housewife. Like,
Yeah.
that's not who I am. So why are you saying this about women when that's not how you created me to be? And then I began to understand the power of a woman being in her true feminine essence.
Yeah.
When I feel like we're like water, like we can adapt and adjust to whatever environment we're in, but we provide life in every situation. Like, we have the power to produce, and that is a beautiful thing in and of itself. And so thankfully, when I hit that rock bottom moment, Desmond was in my life, and he was a healthy, true, masculine man. Now, he was in college, so he was working through a lot of stuff too. DT is who they called him.
Oh.
Right. But he was something that I never experienced in a man.
Yeah.
Right. And so this whole discovery of femininity for me was like a whole new world. And so meeting someone like you, I was like, dang, who is this little girl coming in here? But I admire that, because you have that naturally. That's something that I had to work on.
Yeah.
And so with your experience of finally being okay with operating in who you are, like your feminine nature, we're saying that there's so much power in it, but what would you say is the power in it?
So the power in it is our ability to basically mold and elevate whatever we come into contact to.
Yeah.
It's almost like a woman who is tapped into her true feminine nature. Everything that she touches just immediately elevates.
Yes.
Immediately.
Absolutely.
And I want to touch on submission, because a lot of women view submission as weakness, or submission means not having a thought or not having a say
Come on.
in what's going on in your relationship. But actually, submission is recognizing that the person that you're with understands you and holds you at such a high level and values you so much that they are going to make decisions that are in the best interest for you and the relationship.
Say that. Yes.
So me being in submission to my king, that's me giving him the power to be like, okay, babe, I'm taking control over this. You don't have to worry about anything. And when he puts me in that space of I don't have to worry about anything, that's the sweet spot, because that's where I can really tap into my femininity.
Girl, if I can.
Yeah, go
interject. There are so many Black women in particular who are tired, and they don't even know it. they don't even know, because like you're having to play dad and mama, you're having to provide, you're having to come up with like be the visionary for your family. You're having like, I mean, you're doing everything, and you haven't been given the chance to rest. You haven't been given a chance to like sit in your feminine nature. And I say that because I come from a long line of independent Black women. Some of them, like my mom, they're married to a husband, like to my dad, and some of them married, and they still haven't been able to tap into their feminine nature, and they have been just doing everything, and they're tired, and they don't even know it, and they're not going to pursue it because they are not safe to pursue it.
Yeah.
They're not in a safe space, because in reality, if a single mom was to step back and didn't provide and didn't do all these things, then the family wouldn't end up in a good situation. So in essence, they have to do what they have to do to make things happen. But when you're given the opportunity and the space and the freedom and the safety to be feminine, is a beautiful thing. But the thing is, like, when women come in contact with a true man, a true masculine, healthy God, like, embodiment of a man, they don't, like, their wall is still up.
Yeah.
And they don't know how to switch gears. Tell me what you're thinking.
I was thinking about my mom and what she's going through.
Yeah.
And you're right. And I love how you were saying how these women don't feel safe. And I always preach on my platform. If you are not in a relationship that gives you the space to do that in a healthy way, leave
Quickly.
Leave. That is the importance of being careful about who you choose to build a life with, who you choose to have children with.
My goodness.
That is so vitally important, because if you do not have a masculine man, then you cannot be a super feminine woman. And then now y'all are both stunting your growth. Like I said, it takes a woman that is super tapped into her femininity in order to really activate a man.
Girl.
To like really just expand everything that she touches. But if she does not have the space to do that, then she cannot do that.
She can operate in her true essence.
And that's why it's so important for her to not only be a feminine woman, but to also find a masculine man that she can feed off of, because then it is a healthy, beautiful exchange.
And see, the thing is, like with submission, just going back to that just for a second, submission isn't, there's a negative connotation when you hear the word submission.
Right.
And it doesn't just pertain to the woman.
Right.
It goes both ways. So when now that I'm submitted to my husband is also in submission to me. Like, he is sensitive to my needs and sensitive to the things that he needs to do in order for us to have a healthy household. It goes both ways, right? And then also this connotation behind the word masculinity and the connotation behind femininity. I think we need to talk about that.
Yeah.
Because instantly, like, just thinking about the college Sarah Pearl, baby, you said feminine, I immediately thought weak.
Yeah.
No voice, no opinion. And you said masculine, I thought that the head, I need to be that. Like, I need to be in control of my life. Ain't no man gonna control the house. Ain't no man gonna tell me what to do and all that. So let's talk about it.
Yeah.
Right? Let's talk about feminine and masculine.
So the way that I see femininity is kind of like you said with water.
Yeah.
Like, we are very go with the flow. We're very adaptable. We're very free. Very, very in tune with just the way that we feel. We thrive off of our emotions.
Right.
And people look at emotions like a negative thing, but I always say that emotions are indicators. Emotions simply tell you what you need to know, what your higher self is trying to communicate to you.
Yes.
It's through your emotions. So it's very important that as a woman, we learn how to control our emotions, because that is really the essence of who we are. That's how we tap into who we are. But with a man is very like Jamal. He's very all the time, like very he has to have a plan. He has to feel like he's doing something in
Right.
order to just be sane. He has to feel like he's being helpful, that he's adding value, that he's protecting, that he's providing. As a man, if he's not doing that, he's not going to feel whole within himself.
Because that's the true nature of a man.
Exactly.
If your man is doing something, like if he doesn't have a goal, a dream, an ambition, or something like that, that's a red flag. But go ahead.
Exactly. No, back when I was in, the streets in my dating game, anytime I ran into a new man, the first question was, what are you doing? Like, what are you trying to do? What are you accomplishing? What are your dreams and goals?
Yep.
If he didn't have them, or if they didn't align with mine, then there's nothing left for us to talk about. There's no need.
Baby, don't try to change it.
Yeah.
Don't try to change them. Lord. Okay, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No. And also, I want to touch on the fact that masculinity and femininity are not just reserved for the man and the woman, as in like respectively.
Right.
So women aren't just all feminine, and men just aren't all masculine.
Absolutely.
You talked about a man being in submission to his woman as well. Like in our relationship, Jamal is very in submission to my needs and to my feelings.
Yep.
He has to open himself up to his emotions and to his femininity in order to understand me.
Yes.
And understand what I need so that he can make the best decisions for our relationship and for our family.
Right.
So he has to essentially be tapped into his femininity. And also, men don't know how to take care of themselves. Men will work themselves into the ground if it's left up to them.
It's a fact.
Like back when we weren't together, he was holed up and just grinding day in, day out.
Did you eat today?
Exactly.
Something as simple as that.
So my role as a feminine woman is to make sure that he is taking care of himself, to make sure that he is providing for himself, teaching him what self-care is, teaching him how to go with the flow, teaching him how to let go of things a little bit more. And then I have to also step into my masculine, because as an entrepreneur, which is what we've been talking about, as an entrepreneur, I have to understand that things got to get done.
Absolutely.
If it were up to me, I would be frolicking through a field of flowers 24/7. But since I'm an entrepreneur, since there are things that need to get done, I have to tap into my masculine sometimes.
Yes.
I have to put things on the back burner sometimes. I have to have some type of control and accountability over the things that I'm doing in my decisions.
Yeah. And that's not to say that one is lesser than the other.
No.
At all.
They're both very needed in each individual person and relationship.
What has happened is that in a and I don't know how deep we want to go with this, but in a white male dominated society, it has become toxic. Like the toxic masculinity, right?
Yeah.
And so that's why I wanted to talk about it, like the different, like what femininity and masculinity really is, because in an environment where it's all about control, it's all about power, that's what's been associated with masculinity.
Yeah.
And that ain't it. That's just pure unhealthiness, right? And you have a lot of battered women, a lot of emotionally damaged women who have fallen at the hands of a toxic masculine man, right? And so when we say masculinity and when we say femininity, we mean it in the purest spiritual essence,
Right.
Right? And when you mentioned that femininity reminds you of water, right? The thing is, the ocean can be the most calming, soothing thing.
Yeah.
People go to the beach to experience the serenity of it all, okay? But when there's a storm, when
Dangerous.
the waters are, when they become unsettled, it can get dangerous out here in these streets.
Yeah.
And anybody who's in it, it can overpower you.
Oh, yeah.
And that's the power of water. That's the power of the feminine nature. That's the power of who we are as people. Because like if you cannot tap into and channel who your true spiritual self is, it can run people over, i.e. toxic masculinity, or it can settle you and it can make other people serene and put people at peace, i.e., femininity, healthy femininity, right? And so you have like this whole idea of water and how it relates to like the spiritual elements of femininity and masculinity. Like you have to be able to identify how society has programmed you to believe femininity and masculinity to be, and really think and tap into, look inward with how you relate, like what the spiritual essence, what it's supposed to be, basically.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And it's a powerful thing if you understand it, right?
If
If and like I said, I was what in my like mid-20s when I started discovering my feminine nature.
I mean, same.
Really, yeah, girl, it's been a journey for real. And I, like I said, I've always admired the fact that I would like to say naturally been tapped into your feminine nature, but it sounds like you've had to reawaken it after being shut down from it a little while.
Yeah, I was definitely there, but I had to kind of mother myself and to kind of shape that and figure out what femininity really means.
Yeah,
you know?
and so I mean, I want to encourage anybody who's listening to this now that you have the power to change the route of your life altogether. I know that you may feel helpless. I know that you may feel like you don't have any say so in how your life goes right now. But it literally just takes a mindset shift and a decision that you deserve more and you deserve better.
Yep.
And that's it. So that's my message to y'all. But Lani, did you have anything else to share with us before I sadly wrap this up? I really don't
know.
want.
I feel like we could go on for days.
Yes.
We might have to do another one of
Yes,
these. But
absolutely.
no, I mean, I'm honestly just grateful. I know that we've been planning this for a long
Yes.
time.
Yes.
But like I said, you are welcome back anytime. I'd be happy to talk more with you. This has been so fun.
Fantastic. I absolutely love it. Well, Ania, before I do let you go, I do want to make sure that people can stay in contact with you and stay connected with you. So what's your Instagram and all that good stuff for people to follow you?
Yes, you can find me basically anywhere at by Nia Love, which is BYNIALOVE.
Awesome.
Also, I have a self-love guided journal coming out very, very soon.
That's
It's going
awesome.
to cover a lot of the things that Sarah and I talked about today. And even if you're in a place where you feel like you have nowhere to turn to, I really feel like this journal is going to help you really tap into those areas that maybe you've left untouched for way too long, that might really guide you into getting to the place that you want to be. So
amazing.
that'll be coming out really soon, and I'm super excited.
Oh, I will be staying tuned to that. Let me know when that is released so I can take advantage of that opportunity.
Of course.
Well, guys, you have it. That's Nia Love herself in the flesh. We'll talk to you guys next time. Thank y'all.